Hello. Welcome to Kernels of Truth, brought to you by Progress Kentucky. Thanks so much for joining us to discuss the breaking Kentucky political news of the week. We got the news this week that Governor Beshear was not the winner of the deep stakes. We'll discuss that. We'll also look at a story about former Governor Matt Bevin and all of his very pro-family policies and personal leadership in that space. Then we're going to talk a little bit about Fancy Farm. We're going to have a couple of folks who are in the crowd that we're going to check in with, but it should be a good show. Really excited to have our guest Barry Craig, who is a wonderful writer. He comes to the work from a historian's perspective, also has been very active with the labor movement in Kentucky. So has a wonderful lens to the work that he does, telling folks about Kentucky's political landscape. So always happy to hear his perspective. We're going to talk about organizing as the Democratic Party in rural parts of Kentucky, which I think is a really important issue for us to get our heads around for sure. So yeah, it should be a good show. Excited to have you join us. But before we get into the show, we're going to check in. We're going to plug. I'm on vacation, people, and clearly my head is like in a whole other place. So you're going to need to just give me a little bit of grace, apparently, because I can't read anymore. All right. So you there on the internet, are you ready to help turn Kentucky purple? So we are glad that you are here and you've joined us online or with the podcast. We hope you agree with us that Kentucky deserves better than Mitch McConnell, Rand Paul, Jamie Comer, big banks, Andy Barr, and the GOP supermajorities in the General Assembly, which block our governor time and time again from moving Kentucky forward. So despite the challenges facing Kentucky, we've had some highlights. We rejected Amendment 2, the original classic Amendment 2, to keep abortion protections in our state constitution. We reelected Andy. We can get things done in this state, but it's clear there's still lots of work to do for better electoral outcomes across our Commonwealth. Unless you want your tax dollars siphoned away from public schools and sent to unaccountable religious schools or just kicked back to rich folks, I don't think you do. But between now and November 5th, we're about 92 days away. We're going to be working for better electoral outcomes in Kentucky, and we hope you'll support Progress Kentucky in our campaign for more compassionate Commonwealth. So any contribution you can make, we would appreciate it. We've got our secure online website, Act Blue. Use that to help turn Kentucky purple. $5, $50, $500. It all adds up, and it's all very much appreciated. So now let's check in with our co-hosts. So you there on the internet, you can take part two, but we're going to hear who you are, where you are, and if you got a protest sign, what does it say today? I'm Aaron. I'm coming to you today from the beach in Alabama, but usually in Lexington. And my protest sign says today, Cat Ladies Unite, take down the right. So that's my sign. And now let's hear from our co-host, Dr. Clardy. Are you there?
Aaron, how are you, man?
I'm all right. How about yourself?
I'm doing great, man. I'm jealous. You're on the beach in Alabama. That's nice.
It's been wonderful. It's been absolutely scorchingly hot, but it's been beautiful. Yeah. We've seen dolphins off the just from the beach, which has been amazing. My daughters were thrilled, and it's been a really nice time with the family. They are now they're like, really, you're going to podcast from the beach? I'm like, well, I guess I am. Sorry.
That sounds great. Well, listen, my protest sign is along the same lines as yours. And mine is, to quote that great bard Roger Daltrey from The Who, we won't be fooled again. Nice. What am I referencing? J.D. Vance, or as my friend from Selmer, Tennessee calls him Shady Vance, has done it again. He is repeating the same fallacy from 20 years ago, trying to slime the military record of Governor Tim Walz. We're seeing the same movie play out again that we saw 20 years ago with the Swift Boats for Veterans appeal, which was a slime of John Kerry. And we're not going to fall for the okie doke this time. And my appeal is going to be very different than it has been in the past. I call upon veterans to call out this unpatriotic act. that J.D. Vance is engaged upon in order to score political points.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's an important one. I think veterans do need to stand up. They should not be, manipulated into, kind of tacit approval of what JD Vance is trying to do. That guy is he is a sleaze. He is a sleazy guy that doesn't really stand for anything, it seems like.
You know something, several years ago, and I've said this before, I hosted, this is several years ago, I was part of a ministerial group that was doing a reading of J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy. And I read that book 7 years ago, and I'm going to tell you how it came across to me. How it came across to me is, look at me, everybody look at me. I'm successful. I became a lawyer, and you could do it too if you would just put down the pipe, and you could be successful just like me. It was very condescending. It was very arrogant. It was very patronizing. And we're seeing that same spirit play itself out in this campaign. And we can nip this in the bud by defeating Donald Trump and J.D. Vance in November.
Absolutely. As our governor said, he ain't from here. So yeah, right. The guy that launched 1,000 hashtags or 1,000 takedowns of JD Vance on that hashtag, our man Governor Andy Beshear was not preceded. He did not win the Veep Stakes. Right. He's coming back to Frankfurt. He's going to have some time to work with us here in Kentucky. I mean, I'm a little relieved, honestly. I don't know. I like the fact that he's here as the governor doing important work for our Commonwealth. Obviously, it was an amazing opportunity, and he's a smart political player for sure. Yeah. So I'm sure he would have leaped at the opportunity, because it really would have been a wonderful chance for him to contribute really important things to our country, and I think to help make the Harris ticket that much stronger. They went with Tim Walz, obviously, another governor. I think Governor Beshear had very nice things to say about Governor Walz, and I think Governor Walz is a really talented politician who is going to help tell a very important story, and who is about as authentic an individual you can find on the now national political scene. He is as authentic as JD Vance is inauthentic, I think. He's like the anti-JD Vance, so that'll be a nice contrast for sure. But yeah, what are your thoughts about Governor Beshear not quite being the finalist, but in the conversation up to the end, really?
Well, I'm not going to lie. Yesterday morning, when I found out that it was not going to be Governor Beshear, it kind of stung just for a hot minute, but then it dawned on me. He was on all of the major networks. He was in all of the newspapers. He was telling his story. He told Kentucky's story, and he told it very, very well. And he did very well by himself, and he represented Kentucky very well. And Andy Beshear, when he finishes this term as governor, he is not done. I could easily see a place for him in a Harris Walz administration at some level, or maybe as hopefully one day our next junior senator in 2026. Andy Beshear is not done by any stretch of the imagination. Like you, I'm glad he's staying on as governor, because he has a whole lot of work to do, and he is the one person, he and the lieutenant governor, Jacqueline Coleman, are the two people who will stand against this very right-wing bent that Kentucky seems to be on with these supermajorities. They're going to stand tall for Kentucky and for progressive policies. But no, neither one of them, and especially Governor Beshear, they're not done by any stretch of the imagination. The country will hear from Andy Beshear again.
Yeah, no, I think that's a safe bet for sure. Like, the guy, I think has burnished his credibility as a spokesperson. He's been, again, a very just authentic leader that time and again I think gave a really good line on why Vice President Harris should be the president in November, that election. So yeah, he was great. I don't know if Nate has it queued up. I think I thought this was a really good hit from a news channel in, I think, Iowa. He does a really good interview about kind of how Democrats should approach these kind of rural voters and voters that just really aren't, hardcore Democrats, how to get them, to consider supporting Democratic politicians. And I think he does an amazing job of describing, how to do it. Nate, can we play that?
Absolutely.
What's your message to those Iowa voters on why the Democratic Party should win back their vote in this upcoming presidential election?
Well, in Kentucky, there have been a lot of Trump Beshear voters. I ran against Donald Trump's handpicked candidate and won by 5 points in a state that went to President Trump by, I think, 26 points in the last election. People are willing to change their vote if they believe you care about them. If you talk to them and not at them, if you show up over and over, and if you're focused on the things that matter most to them. You know, all too often, sometimes people in a national party focus on the issue of the day in DC. Well, if you don't feel good about your job, the public infrastructure, your health care, the education your kids are getting, and your public safety, you don't get to anything else. And so it's really important to have that day in and day out focus, and then to actually get results. And then finally, I think you got to share your why. Right? People want to know that you're real. So why do you make decisions that you do? For me, it's my faith. You know, I believe in the golden rule that we're supposed to love our neighbor as ourselves, and the parable of the Good Samaritan that says everyone is our neighbor. And so when I make decisions, tough decisions, when I vetoed the nastiest anti-LGBTQ bill that our state had ever seen, and I did it in my election year, I did it because I believe all children are children of God. And I wanted those children to know that while other people were picking on them, somebody cares about them. And it was after that somebody came up to me and said, one of the nicest things they said that I've heard, they didn't say, I agree with you on everything. They said, I don't always agree with you, but I know you're doing what you think is right. I mean, if we're willing to be vulnerable enough to share our why, it gives people the grace and the space to vote for you, even if they don't agree with everything. But you got to listen to their why too. That's the being seen, the being cared about, and not being overlooked. And in Kentucky, we understand what being overlooked feels like. I'm the type of governor, and if given an opportunity, would be the type of candidate that I think can give voice to that.
Mm-hmm. So good, right? Just so good.
Absolutely.
What a talented and just gifted politician. I just, I'm a little bit bummed that he didn't get the nod. I also am a little bit bummed that he has to come back and deal with this horrible GOP super duper majority, right? Like these guys are just so bad. They can't see the forest for the trees. It's just one-upsmanship. It's just, trying to make him look small. It's trying to take away his power. It's, they're just all horrible and not at all, not at all like him. They never meet him where he's at. They just want to go for the kneecaps and be as just useless as possible, it seems like.
But this is where the challenge is going to fall on us, this being an election year. We have the opportunity to flip a few of those seats in the Kentucky General Assembly. And yes, I know we're all going to be focused in on the presidential campaign and the congressional campaign, and that's well and good. But at the end of the day, as Tip O'Neill reminded us, all politics is local, and we have an opportunity now to get back some of those seats in the state house and the state senate and give the governor the assistance that he needs over these next several years. Because you're exactly right. The supermajority, my state senator, Jason Howell, I've known him a long time. He's drunk the Kool-Aid. My state representative, Mary Beth Imes, I suspect she made the Kool-Aid. But there's an opportunity here, and I think that we need to seize it and get some of those seats back so that at least we can be competitive in those legislative debates going forward and give Governor Beshear the help that he needs.
I'll tell you what, I know that he's had, because of this kind of star turn, he's going to get a lot of speaking requests. He's going to be able to go to swing states and rally the troops. I hope he spends even more time, though, on the ground here in Kentucky, connecting the dots for people, because people do love him. He's the most popular Democratic governor in the nation, right? And so, more popular than Tim Walz, who is very, very popular, right? So, he's an incredibly popular guy, but he needs to tell people why it is like, hey, you like me, that's awesome. You know what you really need to do if you really like me is send your horrible representative packing so I can find people I can work with in the legislature, right? Like that's what, the more he can connect those dots for more and more people. And I know that he's, done some fundraising, and I hope his super PAC has resources to help with that here in Kentucky, because, it's obviously it's the smart move for his own kind of investing in his ability to get stuff done. Because it's great that he vetoed that bill, but the one that he mentioned in that interview, the HB 150, that horrible anti-LGBTQ plus bill, but they just overturned him immediately, right? Because they just don't have the margins to maintain his veto. So that's where we really need to make some headway, is to flip enough seats, like you said, Dr. Clardy, so that we can actually uphold a veto and stop the worst of the worst that legislature keeps coming up with.
And let me just simply say this about Governor Tim Walz. I've heard him speak a few times. I was very proud of the work that he did in Minnesota after the murder of George Floyd by allowing Keith Ellison, the Minnesota Attorney General, to prosecute the case. He is good. And I'm going to tell you something. I cannot wait for him to get into that debate with J.D. Vance. He is going to eat Vance's lunch. This is going to be a remarkable, exciting campaign, both locally and statewide and nationally. I don't know about you, Aaron, but I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm absolutely excited. I would love to just, what we do here, we focus on Kentucky politics. So I don't know that even if Andy Beshear was on the ticket, that Kentucky would be in play. But I certainly know that there's lots of really important races that we need to focus on here. So let's get back to Kentucky politics. This is weird. This was a weird story. We're doing news of the week. I think the first story I want to do is touch on one that a Times of London story, an investigation that was shockingly had Matt Bevin involved, former Governor Matt Bevin. So it was an investigation into a Jamaican troubled teen boarding school. Basically, kids were abused. They had no resources. They didn't have toilet paper. They didn't have food. The workers were supposedly spending some of their own money to try to bring in protein for these boys. It was just, I think, 8 kids who were just absolutely horrifically abused. And parents, mostly American parents, who sent these kids to Jamaica for this, troubled teen effort. Oddly, Paris Hilton is involved. So she's been a very sharp critic of the troubled teen business model and what they do. But yeah, Matt Bevin's kid, one of the, I think, 4 children that they adopted were this was a big a big point of theirs, and one of the reasons apparently Bevin said that he wanted to run for governor was because of how poorly he was treated by folks at the state level when he was trying to adopt folks. So really kind of ugly, doesn't make a lot of sense. These are people that are family values politicians, right? That's what they're all about. That's what Bevin was all about, and had just basically given his adopted son over to a very sketchy institution with beatings, cruel punishments, lack of food, filthy conditions, no communication with the families. And when the school was disbanded because of Paris Hilton's work to elevate what was going on there, the Bevins didn't even show up for the custody hearings in Jamaica. And now this boy is a ward of Jamaica, and just really just horrible. Like, what are you doing? I don't know. I think it exposes a lot about the governor and how just full of it he absolutely was on his family values. He's going through a really messy divorce with his wife, and seems to be really a bit of a jerk in that setting. And really, I don't know that it surprises anyone, but I was a little shocked to see that that his son was involved with this abusive Atlantis Leadership Academy scam. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think of that story, Dr. Clardy?
I did, and I'm waiting to hear some more facts on the ground from Jamaica, and to hear this kid tell his own story at some point. But I'm going to tell you something. It feeds into a very, very dark perception of Bevin. Matt Bevin as a bully. Matt Bevin as a showman. And, I met him several years ago when he was governor. He came to Murray, and he seemed nice enough. He seemed approachable enough. But then I had several people to pull me to the side and said, don't you buy that act. He is a bully. He's mean-spirited, and he has a blade in his spirit. And that was the exact quote. And so this kind of sort of feeds into that narrative. And I'm going to tell you, I've been to Jamaica. I was just this past summer. It's not the most advanced country in the world. So I can kind of see that kid going through that sort of thing. But I'm just waiting for some more facts to come out, because I think that once we continue to unravel this onion, it's going to get uglier and uglier and uglier. And his tumultuous divorce story doesn't help him at all. I think Matt Bevin is done.
Politically, it seems quite done for sure. Yeah, I think he's done. He obviously toyed with the idea of running for something, and got a lot of attention, which is, I think, feeds his ego. He wants to be in the conversation, but no one's interested in what he has to sell, for sure. All right, so speaking of bullies, let's talk a little bit about that historic, amazing event that happens only in Kentucky. It's Fancy Farm, and it happened recently. You were there, right, Dr. Clardy? So you were actually in attendance in your neck of the woods. But what we're seeing now is there's a bit of a blowback, right? It seems like, I don't know.
It is. Honestly, given the heat and how hot it was, and I don't do hot weather very well, I started not to go, but I had made Erin Marshall a personal promise that I would be there to support her and to hear her speech. And I actually had a donation I was going to put in her hand. I didn't get a chance to connect with her after the speech, so I mailed it off when I got home. But it was a Republican love fest and a Republican life fest, all rolled up into one. And I felt very uncomfortable in many junctures during the speech, whether we're talking about the Jamie Comer speech, Mitch McConnell's speech, which, interestingly enough, Mitch McConnell's wife, the former Secretary of Transportation, Elaine Chao, got booed. And, a number of things was running through my head. Why was she booed by fellow Republicans? Was it because she challenged Donald Trump in the last days of his administration? Or is there something else that we really don't want to talk about but should, that's going on in the Republican Party? But it was a very, very hot and messy affair this past year. I started not to go because the governor wasn't going to be there. The lieutenant governor wasn't going to be there. Of course, those are the only two constitutional officers that we have. And, Sherilyn Stevenson was there. Erin Marshall was there. But there were not a whole lot of big-name Democrats. There were none other than those two on the stage. And even the moderator, Roman Catholic priest, he seemed like a nice enough guy, but he took some digs at the governor that I did not feel were necessary. I just thought it was just a bad show all the way around. And honestly, it wasn't as well as attended as it normally is. In past years, I've had to park practically in a cornfield to get decent parking there. I didn't have that problem this time. So it just begs a question to me. What is the picnic? What is the tradition becoming? Is it becoming a Republican love or lie fest? Is it abandoning its commitment to democratic discourse? What is really going on with Fancy Farm? And I'm sure we'll have this conversation, of course, later on in the broadcast. But no, I wasn't pleased this year at all.
Yeah, I wonder, and I've never been, so I probably discount my opinion for what it's worth. But because it's so far away, and it's pretty far away from the democratic power centers of our state, right? So it's far from Lexington, not as far from Louisville, but still far, far from Frankfurt, the golden, these like any of the suburbs of Cincinnati. It's a haul to get there.
It is.
And it's like, well, why are we doing this? I don't know. It seems like there's definitely, I think Coleman Eldridge, does a good job. He has a whole statement he has about Fancy Farm and about the jokes, and that they weren't good, and that they were basically mean spirited, and it was Republicans punching down, which is what they really do love to do. And so it's like the idea of like what's appropriate humor these days. What is, I don't know. I mean, and if the Republicans are going to overwhelmingly make up the folks there, like, what's the point of Democrats showing up? I don't know. I think that I like the vision of it. I like the idea of it. But if it's just going to be this completely one-sided, exercise where the Republicans' kind of inherent meanness and othering is like on full display, like, is there any reason Democrats should validate it by showing up? I don't know.
Now, Jamie Comer's groupies were all there in full force, and they made themselves very, very visible. Interestingly enough, there was a few representatives there from Robert Kennedy's campaign, for what that's worth. And of course, the Libertarian candidate for president showed up, the first time that an actual presidential candidate has shown up since 1975, when George Wallace was seeking the Democratic nomination for governor. But that was about it insofar as inclusion.
That is some interesting folks to be associated with.
And what was so wild, they said, well, we were not able to find a representative for the Harris campaign. And my question was, did you even try? I mean, they could have asked me. But, but I don't think they made an effort. And even if I had spoken, how would I have been received? Which is another question. Would I have felt safe enough to have done it? I'm just saying.
It's not pretty, right? And I think Erin Marshall, somebody who, that's the district, right? And she's working awfully hard to elevate her candidacy. I think the Amendment 2, this year's Amendment 2 folks are out, right? So people are talking about the importance of public schools and, not siphoning off tax dollars for private schools. Father Jim Sicko, I don't know if that's how you say it, who is, this amazing Catholic priest, right? Like really just an amazing guy, does amazing work. And then he was pretty annoyed that his words were kind of used out of context. It didn't show the whole thing when the Republican Party of Kentucky had used a clip of him, giving a fairly light roast of Governor Beshear, the fact that he wasn't there, I don't know, like, the hot thing definitely doesn't make me want to go spend time there. The drive doesn't make me want to go to it. And the overall, perception of it is as, kind of teaming with Republicans, and they get to be as mean as they want to be, and Democrats, make a few decent jokes. And I don't know. I'm not convinced. It's something that, is worth, kind of a hill worth dying on, in my eyes.
The best one to me was 10 years ago when Secretary of State Allison Lundgren Grimes was running for the Senate. She and Senator McConnell were on the same stage, and they went back and forth with each other. And I thought that, to me, that was democracy at its best. I don't know what I just saw this past Saturday. It certainly wasn't democracy at its best, and it wasn't civility at its best. That's just my take.
Yeah, no, and that civility piece, right? It's like, you're supposed to make jokes, and you're supposed to make jokes at the other party, and, what's an appropriate joke these days? It's like, like punching down is horrible. It's good comedy doesn't punch down. It punches up at those who are more powerful than you, right? So it seems like they haven't figured it out yet. I don't know that they ever will. I wouldn't trust this, this crew of Republicans to figure out how to have a good time in a pro-democracy setting. But at any rate, I will say this, when we need to get onto our guest, and I think our guest was actually there as well.
He
so
was.
there's a nice entry point. But yeah, very excited to have with us returning guest Barry Craig, historian, writer, labor advocate, all around good troublemaker, and of course the best John Lewis kind of way. Also Luddite, also fairly crotchety from time to time. I'm just gonna but a wonderful historian and a great writer. And if you miss his stuff, you should definitely check it out. He's on, I think, the Forward Kentucky Network, as are we. So if you're getting your content through that website, check around for Barry stuff. It's wonderful. So Barry, how are you doing this today?
Doing great. Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you, Barry.
No.
Again.
Thank you, Brian. I'll be calling you Brian again. I've got 2 or 3 stories that I need to talk to you about.
Hey, man, let's do it. Yes.
We will.
All right.
Do that on your own time, shall we? But I want to point out that you've been on for a couple, in a couple of things. When the hurricanes hit, the tornadoes. Sorry, I'm on the Gulf Coast. My head's in a different natural disaster. When the tornadoes hit, you had a kind of ringside seat there. You saw your town go through just a lot, and we had you on to give us a kind of breaking coverage of what was happening, and you were amazing and powerful there. Thank you for that. And then also just your work as a kind of a labor advocate, really powerful stuff, and we always appreciate your perspective there. What we wanted to focus on for this conversation, though, is the importance of kind of rural organizing and how you help breathe life into the Democratic Party in places that just don't seem to be, firing up a lot of voters right now in Kentucky, right? So I mentioned earlier the importance of hey, if you're a Democrat, there's a few power centers for our state, and don't take this the wrong way, Brian and Barry, but it's not where you guys are. It's not traditionally thought of that right now. Not right now, right? Historically, I think that's a different question. But Barry, you wanted to talk a little bit about some work you're doing in the area and some success you're having. I think if you listen to the comments that Governor Beshear made at the top of the show, where we had that interview about Iowa voters and these kind of rural voters that maybe aren't traditional Democratic strongholds, and how you win some of those folks over. I think he made some really important points. But we can't win in Kentucky unless we figure this out, right? There's just not there's not enough urban centers in Kentucky to win out. So we need to figure out how to do this rural organizing, rural engagement. Barry, what are you learning?
Well, let me start off by saying that my message this evening is to despondent, dispirited Democrats in bright red counties like mine. Although I grew up in Mayfield, native of Mayfield, I live in Carlisle County now, which, if you look on your map, is about as far west as Kentucky goes. Now, a little background on Carlisle County. Like the Jackson Purchase, Jackson Purchase years ago was called the Democratic Gibraltar of Kentucky because it was so democratic. Let me give you some statistics that will really ruin your day. Donald Trump in 2016 won 80.5% of the Carlisle County vote. In 2020, 81.8% of the vote. Now, Kentucky itself, it was 62%. So my wife and I moved down here. We thought, man, this is going to be rough. Well, I don't know what Democrats do in other counties like ours, but you start to ask around who might be one of us. And I ran across a guy named Greg Weatherford. Greg lives not too far from us. Like me, he's an old Union guy, an old Democratic Union guy. We started talking one day. He's a lot more technologically savvy than I am, which doesn't say much, but nonetheless. He said, why don't we start a Facebook page? I said, I wouldn't have any idea how to do that. Well, I can do it, he said. And he did. I went up to the courthouse, took a picture of the courthouse, and put it on the page. He put it on the page, got this thing rolling. we didn't know how many we'd get. Today we have 135, not just in Carlisle County or Western Kentucky, but statewide. We found that quite heartening. Then one day I got a call from our county judge executive, Greg Terry, another old union guy like me. And he said, I think it's time to try to restart our county committee. This was in May of last year. And he said, let's go and meet at Columbus Belmont State Park on a nice Saturday in May. And I said, let's do that. He said, the only people who are apt to be there are you and your wife, and my wife is a Carlisle County native, and Greg and his spouse. 11 people showed up. That was enough to get the committee off the ground. The next thing we did was to seek some help from some really outstanding Democrats who knew what they were doing. Jennifer Smith of Paducah came over, got the ball rolling. She is going to the Democratic National Convention, along with Aaron Marshall, who we're working very hard for down here. At the time, Daniel Hurt, a former student of mine, who was a Democratic activist, he is now with WKMS, so he's in the fourth estate, so he's out of politics, helped us. So we decided that we would try to do a little fundraising for the governor in last September, was it? Yes, I got my wife's problem. September. So we got together with the Ballard County Committee, and Ballard's another one of these Trump counties. And lo and behold, we attracted more than 90 people to this fundraiser. The governor came, and we raised $14,500 for his campaign. We were very proud of that. And then back in June, we had a fundraiser for Aaron Marshall and our 4 state house candidates at Columbus Belmont State Park. 50 people, more than 50 people came to that, and we raised $1,400. So my message to my fellow despondent Democrats, you can do this. You just got to start doing it. There's help. Kenny Fogel with the Kentucky Democratic Party is a phone call away. And you can do this. And it's fun. We have, since we started this, we have never had a meeting. We didn't have a quorum. We get 18, 19, 20 people show up every meeting, and it's fun. We had an election night watch party back in November. Of course, you never heard of these things are going to turn out. Brian, you've probably been a few of these. A lot of them I've been to turned into wakes, but this was great. Beshear led all night long. So what I'm saying, bottom line is this: you can do it. I think it's a waste of time to try to convince these Trumpers. So what I suggest you do is go and find the Democrats and turn them out and appeal to the persuadables. You don't preach the choir, you don't preach the unconvertible. And that's my lesson for tonight.
That's a good lesson. That's great.
Sure
Thank you so much
is.
And so I guess the question is, and I'm going to play a little devil's advocate. Like, do you think that the Democratic brand can be salvaged in some of these areas? Like, I just felt, and this is PTSD, because I did a lot of phone banking, through a lot of Democratic voter lists, and these are people who, like, Democrat. I'm not a Democrat. Like, well, you are registered as a Democrat. Like,
Yeah,
and they
right.
will, swear up and down, that they were not, and that they hate Nancy Pelosi, and that like she's the devil, right? I think the Fox Newsification of our kind of our nation has made the Democratic brand really challenging. Folks even who were historically, go-to folks are like pulling themselves out and saying, no, the Democrats are evil. And I guess it gets to the point that you're making, like, you got to find the folks you can, in fact, have a conversation with. But if you're calling Democratic voter lists and that's who you're getting, like, where do you find these people, Barry?
Well, I'll give you a little tip how you can tell a real Democrat from a Republican in Democratic guise. We had a state representative from Mayfield years ago named Dick Kastman. Dick told me one day, hey, he said, do you know how you can tell a real Democrat in Western Kentucky? I said, no. He said, a real Democrat says, I'm a Democrat. A Republican says, I'm a registered Democrat. And of course, that goes back to the days when there were so few Democrats here that the Republicans didn't even have primaries. I'm sorry, what? There's so few Republicans. My wife is prompting me. Good job. Live TV is rough. And she said, and it's absolutely true. That's how we did it. Also, by the way, if I may divert, I found your Fancy Farm discussion fascinating. I really don't know what to do about that. On the one hand, I don't blame people for boycotting this thing. It is a Republican fest. I'm 74 years old. I remember when Fancy Farm was fun. Back in the days of John Sherman Cooper and Marlowe Cook, Republican senator, Democratic senators Wendell Ford, Governor Ned Breathitt when I was a kid. Mitch McConnell made it mean. He is the one who opened the sluice gates of slime in this picnic. And besides that, of course, the whole area has gone Republican. Getting it back, we're going to have to play the long game.
Yeah.
And I hope I live to see this. I have supreme confidence that the young folks of Kentucky, like our son who's 31 years old, are going to change this. Let's bottom line this. This whole Trump movement is based on racism.
Bingo.
Donald Trump, I call him the Yankee George Wallace. That's exactly what he is. It is no coincidence that 99.9% of these people are white and they're right wing. They just never got over the Civil Rights Acts of the 60s. They just haven't gotten over the fact that we twice elected a black president. And look how Trump's going after Kamala Harris.
Bingo.
Kids, our son's age, they have no use for this racism, this sexism, this misogyny, this nativism, this xenophobia, this anti-LGBTQ hatred.
Right.
I hope I live to see the promised land. Maybe I won't. But unfortunately, it is awfully, awfully hard to change. I think this ticket the Democrats got this time is a great ticket. I think Governor Walz, and I like you, Brian. I want to make a comment about J.D. Vance's commentary about Governor Walz. Mm-hmm. My next door neighbor in Mayfield was a man named Dan Garrett. God rest his soul. He was a staff sergeant in the Army Infantry in World War II. Dan won a Silver Star and a French Croix de Guerre with Palm for valor, plus a combat infantry badge. And Dan told me it didn't matter if you were in combat, if you were overseas, or you were at home in a uniform, we all did our part.
That's right.
So Vance needs to shut his yap about that.
Absolutely.
He won't, of course. I can't wait till Walz gets him in a debate. The old football coach, state championship football coach, he'll chew him up and spit him out.
Yes, he will.
So will our presidential hopeful if the Trumpster decides to debate her. That remains to be seen.
Yeah, I think he's scared. I think he's absolutely
I do too.
He shook.
I think they're both scared because I would recommend that your listeners or viewers, whatever you call them, should watch Harris grilling Bill Barr, Jeff Sessions, better known as the elf on the shelf, and Booth. I'm sorry, Brett Kavanaugh, better known as Booth. Take a look at those interviews that those grillings. She was a prosecuting attorney. She was a bulldog there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that'll be. I hope that it happens because it'll be fun viewing for our side. I believe. But and I do think and I'll turn it to Dr. Clardy to ask a question after this. But I just wanted to check in. Like, you're a labor guy. We are in a labor moment right now in our country. And I think that's incredibly exciting, but I get worried because I feel like the rank and file of a lot of the labor movement, they might end up voting for Trump, right? Like how do we tell the story in a way that makes people realize why the Democrats are the clear choice for every union? There was a Teamsters. The Teamsters president spoke at the RNC, which I was a little bit shocked about. If you actually heard his comments, they weren't endorsements of Republicans very clearly. No. But the
No.
fact that he showed up there was interesting, and I think
Correct.
more reflecting that he's very aware of his base, and than about anything. So I don't know. This is a bit of a curveball question, Barry, but I know you're a labor historian as well. And how do you think how do we do more to ensure the rank and file understands the value of that labor leadership and that importance of the democratic role in supporting better labor organizing conditions?
Well, this is a case of whether you think the glass is half full or half empty. On any given election at any level, if the general public voted like union members, we would win every time. You're talking usually 66 to 33. About a third of our membership votes the other way. We wish it would be 0%, but that's not bad. Again, Trump would have never won. I think younger trade unionists are becoming more and more aware. It's awareness of it. Now, you mentioned Fox News. We have nothing in this country well, MSNBC, I watch it all the time, and I bet you do too. But MSNBC is not nearly as far to the left as Fox News is to the right. Now you've got these other groups that are even far to the right of Fox News. I'm also, the thing about Fox News, I'm not sure if Fox News wins converts or simply reinforces attitudes that are already there. I remember back when we had three networks, ABC, CBS, NBC. These right wingers complained they were all three left wing, awful, and all that kind of stuff. That's a concern, and that is debated by journalists, historians, and people in general. I don't know about what I think about Fox News, whether or not they are winning converts. I've seen stories about people. There was some story my wife told me about this guy's father listened to Fox News all the time, and he went to the hospital, and his father put on CNN, and he completely changed his attitude. Which is interesting. I will not go into a place that if they have a Fox News on, I'll walk out. So that's a good question. And to be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that. But again, I think that labor is going to really redouble our efforts. Joe Biden was the most pro-labor president since Franklin D. Roosevelt. Joe Biden walked a picket line. And you notice Joe Biden goes to union halls. Donald Trump goes to non-union plants, non-union facilities. Yes. And you notice how many times Joe Biden said good union jobs. Trump never says that. Trump is for right to work. Trump said he would sign the PRO Act if it landed on his desk. Trump stacked the NLRB with union haters. And you go to Elaine Chao, she was the anti-labor labor secretary. And I think that there's a lot of enthusiasm. And I was a big Joe Biden supporter. And I'll be honest with you, when he stepped down, I wept a little bit because he is such a decent human being. But on the other hand, I'm also a realist. He had to go. He really did. And he did. You think Donald Trump would step down? Hell no. You think he and of course I love all the stuff that's being said about J.D. Vance. You think Trump will drop him? Hell no. Trump never makes a mistake. What was that song? Love means you never have to say you're sorry. If Donald Trump means you never say you're sorry.
That's right.
All right, Dr. Clardy, question from you.
Well, sort of to piggyback on what you guys have been talking about, Barry, you mentioned George Wallace and everything. The thing about Wallace, he was a diehard, deep, dyed-in-the-wool racist, no question. But Wallace came from poverty, and he could easily identify with working class people, especially in that 72 campaign, when he was able to win union votes in the Democratic primary. My point is, Donald Trump doesn't give a hoot in hell about working people.
Right.
And his track record, his very lifestyle, the way he has jilted contractors is testament of that. He is fiercely anti-labor. as you said, he has always stacked the deck against working people. How do we tell that story to get working people not to vote against their self-interest again?
Well, that's what we try to do on we have a website, kyaflco.org. We have a Facebook page. Then we have a private Facebook page for union activists. You know, Brian, we were in the same, but you're still in the education business. I was a teacher for 24 years. If education doesn't work, we're sunk.
Right.
I'll tell you a story about George Wallace. George Wallace, when he ran, I think he was a judge in an Alabama county, and he ran as a New Deal candidate. He didn't race bait, and he got beat. Remember what he said?
He said he'd never be out inwarded again.
That's exactly right. And that's what he did. And Trump basically, let's get right down to it. Trump hates who they hate. It's simple as that. It's all based on hatred.
Yeah.
And I'm not a particularly religious person, but I thought Jesus said, Jesus' love, isn't that in the Bible or somewhere? Jesus preached love over hate and peace over war and charity over greed. And brotherhood and sisterhood.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
but I'm
Jesus
not.
also said in John 3:16, whosoever. That means all y'all fall into the ark of God's love. And it seems like the Republican Party's forgotten that part.
That's right. That's right. It's the party of hate. And again, you know, if you study history, the Republican Party today would be a far right-wing fringe party in Europe.
Yep.
And I don't toss the fascist handle about willy-nilly.
I do.
But and I understand that. It's getting to that point. It is getting to that point. It is frightening, absolutely terrifying the way that they are. And this Project 2025.
Just vote once, just this last time, Christians. Just vote this time, and then you're not going to need to worry about it.
Yeah,
ever again.
How about that?
Yeah, 2025 is absolutely
but
frightening.
You know, Trump is in a long line of these cynical figures who use religion for his own benefit. Napoleon did. Hitler did. Hitler co-opted the Lutheran Church and the Catholic Church in Germany.
Sure did.
And so here you see Trump is doing the same thing. There's a wonderful song I recommend to your listeners or viewers, and it's called "Jesus Loves Me, But He Can't Stand You." It is by the Austin Lounge Lizards, and it's online, and it really, really nails it.
I think that's a good spot to leave it. Barry Craig, always appreciate you sharing your insights with us.
Enjoyed it.
Open invite to come back. I think we've nailed the tech side of it. Thanks to your wife.
Yes, thank God to my wife. Yes, yeah. Because it was for me. All I'd be doing is been cussing all night long because I'm just not any good at this stuff, you know. But anyway, I try.
You can find your writing. Where do we find your writing?
I write pretty regular for Forward, Kentucky. In fact, I've got several stories about Fancy Farm that are up and some on the way. Once in a while, I write for the Kentucky Lantern, and then, of course, I write for our webpage, and also for a publication called And books on. And what? Oh yeah, right. My what? Shameless self-promotion time. My books. I've written 7 and co-authored 2 more. Also write for LA Progressive in Los Angeles, of all places, and so that's what I do. I enjoy myself. I've been retired for 11 years. I'm really not retired. I'm just doing a different job.
There we go. Forward Kentucky, always good to give a plug to that website. That's a good spot.
Bruce Maples does a great job. I appreciate having him.
He does.
We appreciate Bruce. He's a resource. All right. Have a wonderful rest of your day, Barry. And I think what we're going to do right now, we're going to roll into a call to action. So we do have some important stuff to do beyond the politics right now. Super important. This is coming to us from our friends at Kentuckians for Energy Democracy. They've actually had a really good run of fighting for the environment and consumers at the Kentucky Public Service Commission. That's, of course, where Andy Beshear's PSC appointments are having, a really big impact. So his appointments are actually listening to advocates and not just rubber stamping the proposals of the huge energy companies. the PSC recently ruled on Kentucky Power's most recent rate case. The original request from Kentucky Power would have increased residential bills by over 18%. Public advocates who intervened came to a settlement agreement with Kentucky Power that keep the rate increase around 11%. Still not great, but providing many new protections for low-income customers, including important protections against disconnections. So the PSC ruled the impact of the utilities proposal would have been excessive and disturbing based on hearing from so many customers they could not afford a rate increase. So that's really useful. And the typical residential customer's bill will now see about a 5.66% increase over the current rates over the span of this decision. So it's a really big win. And the Kentuckians for Energy Democracy want to keep the momentum by urging the PSC to require better energy efficiency investments by Kentucky Power. What we know is that demand side management or energy efficiency, it's almost always the cheapest and most effective way to lower bills, protect homes, and address energy demand. The cheapest power plant is the one you don't have to build, right? So by doing more energy efficiency programs, really can save consumers a heck of a lot of money. But there's not a huge incentive for Kentucky Power to do more energy efficiency because they like to sell power. That is their job, right? So that's why the PSC perspective is so important here. We've got an action alert up right now. Tell the Public Service Commission to ensure that Kentucky Power invests in us, help us save money on our electric bills, help us reduce the need for future investments in new fossil fuel plants. And then we've got an action alert you can click on. Super easy to take action. Kentuckians for Energy Democracy really like to work with those folks. They do really important work. And I think you can go ahead and take action online. All right. So that's, I think, it. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Clardy to close us out.
Aaron, Barry, Nate, thank you. This was great. This was a great conversation. And I'm really excited about our conversations going forward as we go forward into this campaign and into this new era of Democratic leadership at the national level. Progress Kentucky is a nonprofit organization registered with the Kentucky Secretary of State and is organized as a 501c4. We are affiliated with the Indivisible Project, a Commonwealth Alliance for Voter Engagement, or CAVE, and we are part of the membership of the Forward Kentucky Network. Progress Kentucky's goal is to educate, organize, increase voter turnout, and advance a progressive agenda through civic engagement. Now, if you think this week's show was good, next week's show is going to be off the chain. Next week's show will feature another great guest. We'll be joined by an outstanding writer, Willie Carver, to discuss why he hates J.D. Vance. Production of episode 172 was by Nate Orshon. Nate also wrote and performed our theme song. You can find more information and music at natosongs.com. If you miss our weekly live stream on Facebook or YouTube, audio podcasts and our shows are available on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you do listen to the pod, if you do, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you're listening now. Logo and some content provided by Couchfire Media. Thank you all. Good night, and we'll see you next week.